Sancho to score. No mistakes this time.
That is a rocket.
Royce and another fantastic goal by Marco Royce. Haaland's volley is beautiful beyond compare.
Jetzt kommt das Wunder von Dortmund. Foulspiel von Nico an Götze.
Needs to lay it off. We're going to shot away. Oh, what a goal!
Welcome back to Dortmund Dispatch. Today I'm joined by Pedro and Brian, and we're going to be doing an international break episode, try and keep this quick for you, and we're going to talk about Dortmund's biggest on-field issue. So we're not going to be talking about Hans-Joachim Watzke today because he's not on the field. But first off, how are you surviving the international break, Pedro?
I don't know. It's very boring. I always kind of hate the international break, even though I follow a couple of games. But I mean, it's never the same, you know. I miss Borussia Dortmund. I miss Spurs. I miss the suffering, you know, because with my international teams, I don't really care that much. Even though I thought Brazil finally had a decent display against Korea, even though it's not the most. I mean, it's a good team, but it's not the most qualified team that Brazil is gonna have to face in the World Cup. But yeah, just enjoying the break, but I'm very anxious for their Klassiker and what's going on with Dortmund in the next few weeks.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Brian, how are you making it through?
I mean, I like international football. I just don't like the breaks. I love the tournaments. I'm not really the biggest fan of the qualifying games and all that. I personally don't end up really following until super close to the end or whatever, just to make sure, because it's kind of a toss-up with Poland. You never know. So.
Well, for international players, Dortmund did have a ton of guys play for Germany today in a win. Nagelsmann said the performance was subpar. I have not watched a single international match, so I can't tell you much more about it. I believe the starters for Dortmund were Karim Adeyemi and Schlotterbeck. Was there one more in there?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, well, Cole Campbell started in the quarterfinal match for the U.S. men's national team U20s, and he scored the only goal as they went out of the tournament 3-1. But let's get into our actual topic now that we're through with the housekeeping. And Pedro, I'm going to start with you. Where do you think Dortmund have struggled the most on the pitch this season?
I think if I have to choose one area, I think would be the midfield. Even though we had a couple of moments where we've seen this partnership between Mecha and Sabitzer kind of work, I'm kind of skeptical in the way that we are playing with that double pivot, especially with Mecha being so inconsistent, especially off possession as well. And in possession, we have a few questions as well. I think Sabitzer has been secure, a lot of average performances in my opinion, but at the same time, I already talked to the podcast before. I struggle to see what he offers in possession. And I think we also could maybe shift things around in the midfield, especially with Joe Bellingham, possibly asking for an opportunity there. And yeah, I think that's my biggest question in the midfield, and also how Dortmund plays in possession, because we all know that Nico Kovac has been a more reactive coach and liking to play more in transition. But when Dortmund are required to have the possession to create chances, high quality chances, I think we struggled a little bit in that area, and we're gonna have those scenarios a couple times in the season, I assume, of course. So I'm still skeptical on how Dortmund are gonna deal with that area.
Brian, do you think that it's just an issue of personnel? Do you think there's a tactical adjustment we could make there? What do you think's going on?
I think it's a little bit of both, frankly speaking. At the end of the day, we can kind of look at the profiles we have in midfield. Obviously, Pedro mentioned Mecha and Sabitzer. They're the two that have been starting. Sabitzer is having a better season than last season, a lot more stable, as Pedro said already. Mecha has been hit or miss, depending on the game. And then you have a player like Joe Bellingham, who, obviously came in despite, us talking about, other people talking about it, with far more expectations than I guess he should have. Be that the name, the fee. I feel like, it's very easy to trap yourself in that, be like, oh, it's the Bellingham name, and he came in for another 30 million euros, to expect him to be that starter. He showed a little bit of it during the Club World Cup, where you thought, maybe okay, I can see him getting a little bit more minutes. But now he's kind of taking a little bit more of a backseat. He's getting kind of just minutes off the bench and stuff like that. You have an aging Pascal Gross as well. So I mean, there is a semblance of depth there. I don't think it's long-term depth or depth that you can rely on for any sort of deep run. Because at the end of the day, let's say a Nemecha or Sabitzer gets injured, would I want to see Pascal Gross playing all those minutes? I think you'd be gassed, and it wouldn't work out too well. So probably not. He's definitely good as a relief player, but I feel like you need more bodies that can fill in that role more permanently. And I think that's something that Dortmund obviously have to have an eye on for the future. There were obviously profiles that we could have gone for previously during this winter break. This summer break. Victor Froholt, one of them, who's blossoming in the Portuguese league. So I mean, there's a ton that could have been done on the profile front. I want to say that our midfield though, like when it comes to like how we've been playing under Terzic, under Kovac is stable, but it hasn't been exemplary, if that makes sense. Like I don't feel there has been a standout player that has kind of made me go, wow, our midfield has been revolutionized, or it's doing something more than it's done in the past. I don't know, like it just hasn't really spoke to me as something that like has been anything more than just stable. When it comes to the issues with the team right now, it's going to be interesting that I say this because the last time I was on, I was basically saying, oh, the defense has been great, but we do still have those defensive blips every now and then. For example, the two that come to mind specifically are the Baumgartner goal that when we played against Leipzig that he scored against us. That was, in the 7th minute, I believe, and it was also defensive lapse. And then you had that goal against, or the goals that Athletic Bilbao scored against us, where it was Sula and Anton that kind of just had that miscommunication. And I know those things happen, but despite the stability that we've seen, we've also seen that those blips still happen, and they're almost too silly to think that they're just like mistakes almost, if that makes sense. I think Joey was on the pod recently talking about how like we're still capable of blowing that lead that we've had. I mean, the Juve game comes to mind. The season opener against St. Pauli comes to mind. So we still have things to work on there, I think. And I think that's the main thing that stands out to me, because stability is the operative word for this team right now. And yeah, that's where my mind's at.
Well, in my opinion, I'm talking about something that's completely unrelated to both of you, because I think like the midfield, what we've seen from Kovac is that this season right now, at least at the start, I think in 3 months we'll have to talk about Joe Bellingham in a different way, because at that point he should be a bigger part of this team, and then a lot of the depth issues you guys are talking about in our midfield, where after our first two we go from being passable to suffering. I think in 3 months we could be talking about Job, and I think this often happens with midfielders because it's the hardest position to kind of come into a new system, new players, all that stuff. So I think in 3 months, if we still are just at this same place we're at now, I think that's a different conversation. But to me, it's not to do with the defense, because we need to talk about like the margin for error we have defensively in this game, because we're talking about defensive lapses from the last 2 games. Like Athletic Club de Bilbao, we conceded 0.9 xG, and that's not a lot. Granted, we scored 4 goals that game, but it was only from 1.1 xG, and like single game xG, we don't need to talk about that. Like things like that will happen. But if you look at the next match, some of that kind of goes back in line with what you would expect from the chances we conceded. Granted, you have a bit of a mistake from Anton to allow the one big chance that they score, and like you can always talk about that, but like the XG you concede is only going to be so low. And in that match, we only conceded 1.1, but we only put up 0.9, and we also conceded so early in that match. And so I said, like on this show going earlier in the season, but I said I'm curious to see our attack when we go down early, because we had scored the first goal in every game going into that, every league game at least. And then we concede first against RB Leipzig, and instead of putting up like a vintage attacking display, we struggled to break them down. And to me, our attack right now is my biggest concern, because if you compare us to Bayern, our defense isn't at like half an expected goal conceded per game like Bayern's, but it's well under 1 xG conceded per game at 5.1 from 6 games. Like that's pretty passable. That's over a goal better than the third best defense in the league by expected goals allowed. And if you look at our expected goals per game, like to me, Bayern are kind of at a place where you're not going to be able to match them because they're nearly at 3 a game. It's like 2.6, I think. But Dortmund should be striving for right around 2, in my opinion. Like, that's how many chances we should get. And, like, you're not necessarily going to put up 2 expected goals against Bayern Munich or against RB Leipzig, who we did just play. But, like, you look at the Wolfsburg performance, we again struggled to create chances in a match that we just won 1-0. Wolfsburg are pretty mid-table. Mainz, we won 2-0. We had some chances. But we could have had more, and in these matches, like, we're just not able to dominate them in, I think, the way we have the attacking talent to do so. And so to me, like, there's a bit of an imbalance that we've talked about on the show as well with Maxi Bayer. So I want you guys to kind of talk a little bit more about the attack. So statistically, we're third in the league. We're not bad by any stretch of the imagination. But to me, just like talking about like how fluid it is, there have been times where Maxi Bayer is getting in some very interesting positions. But like the shot numbers are down from where he was last year. And he's still being played in this like wide role. Like, do you think there's a better solution to get our front line in a more fluid attacking like way? Like, how do we open up our attack and start to create big chances routinely, whether it's against big sides or little sides? Brian, do you think there's like a better way our attack can be constructed right now?
So the construction of the attack is definitely something that, you know, we've talked about on here. Eli, I believe it was you that even said, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, you've said that sometimes the attack looks better when it has a front 2 of Maxi Bayer and Karim Adeyemi than, for example, when we're playing with a Serhou Guirassy up front and the 2 players out wide. I think that is something that, you know, we need to keep in mind here. I think that it's the attack is in a tough position right now because you do have a lot of quality players, and it's weird to say it's in a tough position, but Kovac does have, he's a bit spoiled for choice there, and it is, I guess, difficult to give all these players minutes. So in trying to do so, he's possibly playing Maxi Bayer out a little bit more wide, you know, trying to give him minutes there. So it's tough because you do have a lot of talent there. And with Karim Adeyemi in the form that he's been in, you know, you don't want to disrupt that. So he's been obviously giving him minutes up front with like a player like Serhou Guirassy. So I think maybe the issue might be trying to like fit everyone in at once. And I think that is kind of putting players in a position where it's taking away from, you know, them being able to perform at their best. And it's weird to say because you want to see all these players playing. And you want to see rotation. We talked about even before that, you know, a player like Serhou Guirassy can't be playing all the minutes. So you need these players there to rotate in and do that. I don't know. Like it's a weird issue. I personally wouldn't have necessarily said that the attack has been that much of a problem. I do think that, you know, and granted, I don't have numbers in front of me or anything like that. We are creating chances. We are scoring goals. I mean, that's evident. We've been winning games. Okay. But still, like, it's
like the biggest thing to me with our attack that's kind of like papered over the cracks at the start of the season is in the Champions League, we have 8 goals. We have 8 goals from 2.6 XG in the Champions League. In the league, we're a lot more in line with XG, and we're always going to overperform XG in the league, so I don't love talking about it in that way. But in the Champions League, we've seen in recent seasons when our numbers are not great and we're scoring a ton of goals in the group stage last year, led by Garassi scoring literally in like every game in the group stage, like 2 goals. As soon as we get into the harder games, it starts to fall back in line because your attack just isn't that good and you're scoring these goals from nothing. And you kind of saw those goals dry up under Nuri Shaheen in a way. Like early in the season, you had these over performances from guys like Garassi and Jamie Gittins, and you kind of ride the hot streaks. And so right now, I think we're on a bit of a team hot streak in the Champions League, rather than actually playing good attacking football. And so, like, I understand seeing that, but to me, like, I look at the Wolfsburg match, and like that's a home match for us. Um, and I just look at how we're attacking, and that to me is one of the most worrying signs. Like Wolfsburg, not a bad team by any stretch of the imagination. St. Pauli away, like they're pretty good defensively, but I just think that like there's moments in that match where like we should be doing a bit more. Um, and then again against like RB Leipzig, like that's a home match. You go down early, and you'd want to be seeing when the pressure, when you're able to pile on that pressure, like you're able to create chances. So there's just a couple like red flags to me in terms of the chance creation, mainly in the Wolfsburg match and that RB Leipzig match. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I do agree with your point that you made about like you want to have your best players on the pitch at the same time, and so like while I think like the match against Mainz where Garassi drops out and you get in Julian Brandt and you get a little bit more dynamism from Karim Adeyemi and Maxi Bayer, like I think that works very well there. I still think like you have to play Garassi, but is there like a case where Maxi Bayer and Karim Adeyemi do a little bit of rotation and you bring in like a Julian Brandt and you play a front two, you let Maxi Bayer run in behind. My dog is scratching her collar, sorry for the audio. But do you think something like that could maybe help alleviate the situation, Pedro?
I think that's a good idea. And I was even reflecting, we were saying earlier, I think what I said was pretty similar to your worries about the attack. It's like how Dortmund behaves in possession. When we are behind the scoreboard, how does this team react when he has most of the possession and needs to create high quality chances? And I agree. I think we still struggling in that department. And yeah, I think that's a possible solution. I think it's not. I think he's a very interesting option in terms of his size and like goal scoring ability, but he's not the best piece we have in build up, and especially just to create good combinations with his teammates surrounding him. So I think that could be an interesting approach. Just put Julian Brand there, more creative piece around Adeyemi and Maxi Bayer to give more dynamism to the attack. That's a good solution. I think just having Julian Brandt at the front line, I think it's going to be pivotal in those kind of matches where we are either behind the scoreboard or we're just going to play against teams who sit really deep. So we would have most of the possession anyway. So having a creative guy there, I think it helps a lot, especially with the options with the midfield, because I don't think in match or Sabitzer are necessarily creative, nor they are the best progressors in terms of passing on the team. And I think they're both more carriers and they're more threatening close to goal, especially shooting from range. So in that sense, I don't really think they are the better pieces to combine with the attackers. If we either have to have the possession and just to create those triangles to try to open up our opponent's defensive line. I think a possible like tactical approach that we could change a little bit. I think I would like to see our flankers to not only to overlap that much, but underlap a little bit as well. Just go a little bit more through the middle, and that's how exactly Young Koto scored against Leipzig, to have being in a non-orthodox position in this scheme, being there close to the box and being there to score the goal. I think just having Svensson and Koto, who had really good passing quality, having those guys in those half spaces, helping create good combinations. I think that's also an interesting approach we could have.
I think Pedro makes a good point there, especially with the lack of creativity. Because at the end of the day, when you don't have a player like Julian Brandt or an attacking midfielder on the pitch, as we have not been playing as much, considering he's been spending most of his time on the bench, you do lack that creativity, and that impetus falls on the attackers. And that's not to say that Karim Adeyemi isn't capable of doing it. Of course he is. He has multiple assists this season. It's not to say Maxi Bayer isn't capable of it. He has a couple assists as well. But as you mentioned, Pedro Serhu Girassi, for example, isn't super like awesome in build up all the time. So like putting the responsibility of creation on these players when these players are finishers more than anything, I think is a little bit backwards. And I think that's like over the summer. That's why we were calling for a new attacking midfielder to come in. Like if you're not going to trust Julian Brandt, which it still remains to be seen because there's obviously rumors about him possibly now maybe getting a contract extension. If you can't trust that player, you have no one else to kind of fill that void. I mean, we do have Carney Chukwuemeka who comes on once again as a substitute for the most part. So it's like, I don't know, like if you don't have that creative impetus and you do put that responsibility on the attackers, I feel like you are going to see your attack stall a little bit more, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that the solution is a Maxi Bayer Karim Adeyemi front line. Like, I think that you want to find a way to get Girassi in. I think there's another issue, Brian, that I think you might want to speak on a little bit, because you're always talking about the Dortmund ethos and getting these guys to really commit and play for the team and making sure that we have a balance of pressing from the front line. Like, there was just the Nico Kovac quote about Karim Adeyemi needing to learn that the game is played in two directions. But to me, when I look at the attack and I'm trying to balance pressing with some of the attack, one of my concerns would be trying to find a way to get Girassi and Brandt on the pitch. I'm not sure it can ever work, at least against the top side, because Girassi pressing, like there's not a lot of effort there and there's not a lot of ability to do it when he does. With Julian Brandt, there's a willingness to do it, but there's not necessarily a skill for it, and he is a little bit lightweight in the tackle, as much as he has shown a willingness to run around. And you also talk about with both these guys, one with a recurring muscle issue right now in Girassi, and the other, again, having played like multiple campaigns right around like the 3,500 minute mark in Julian Brandt. Like, do you think there's a way to get both these guys into the 11 from the start of the game without sacrificing some defensive solidity?
I mean, it's tough because once again, with a player like Brandt, and this is something we've harped on with him on numerous occasions. Like, we haven't seen necessarily as much of it this season, but he's completely capable of giving the ball away in dangerous positions and putting the defense and the midfield in a haphazard situation where they have to react to that, and that disrupts the entire flow of the game. So it's difficult. I mean, once again, I feel like that's the thing. I don't feel there's necessarily the trust there for at least to my understanding, from what I've seen, for Kovac to do that unless he's in a pinch. So I don't know if there's a way to do that. Because at the end of the day, you're sacrificing something. It'll also depend on how flexible Kovac wants to be with this system, because right now the back three is working with the wing backs that we have with Svensson and Kuto. Seems to be the way that we're going. It's just hard to fit all these players on the pitch and make it all work cohesively. I don't know.
Yeah, Pedro, that was a great transition from Brian into my next question, because I want to ask you, like, do you think that part of the issue with like balancing both the midfield and the attack is two guys we signed in the summer? We haven't seen a lot of either yet. We've seen a bit more of Carney Chukwuemeka, but again, it's 4 appearances for less than 90 minutes. He's still well under that 30-minute per appearance mark. And then we have, Fabio Silva, who's looked very bright when coming on and has looked like he can at least play the role of an excellent super sub. But given the expenditure on both these players, do you think Dortmund would have been better served getting like a guy with a true position in midfield, and a guy who maybe is a bit more of a wide attacker and allows you to uh, balance Maxi Bayer's minutes, rotating Guirassy and playing through the middle. Do you think there's a way in which either of these players can be the solution in terms of the attack, or do you think that maybe Dortmund would have been better served elsewhere? Obviously, it's still very early in these players' career at Borussia Dortmund, but what are your thoughts on kind of some of the squad building issues there?
Yeah, that's a difficult question because I don't think it's only on the personnel. I think the tactical patterns and the way that we attack are very stale and very predictable. And that's something that we discussed in the previous episode. And something that I pointed out that you said in the group chat, Eli, is that the subs and the way the players are always positioned on the pitch is very always hierarchical. So we always know what to expect and which players are going to go out and which ones are going to go in and which positions they're going to play. Like in match, is always going to leave for Joe Bellingham, and Karim is going to always leave for Julian Brandt. Julian Brandt apparently cannot play on the left flank or more centralized. So I think the attacking patterns and the way the Kovac can be a little bit more flexible with our current options and just switch positions a little bit just to try to implement a different strategy or try to surprise our opponent's defensive systems. Just to, as I said, just putting the flankers a little bit or more on the inside, underlapping a little bit, just changing the patterns a little bit, just because it's always too predictable. But I mean, with these guys that we sign, few possible solutions. I think we have mostly carriers rather than like good progressors on the midfield. So I think in that sense we lacked a little bit in the transfer market in that sense. A guy who really excels in possession, and the only guy I can think right now in the squad who has that capability is Nico Schlotterbeck, and he's a center back. So in that sense, I think I would have that both, like that combination, maybe having Joe, a guy who I think it's better in possession within our current midfield options, and I think has more press resistance than the other options that are playing right now. I think playing him aside, I'm not sure Chuck is the best option right now. He hasn't impressed me in the few minutes that he had in the season. So I think I would play, I think Joe with Matcha, not saying that Matcha is brilliant, but just because he has that physical element, his long strides, his frame, and his ball carrying ability, I think it adds up to what Job can bring on the table. Besides his shooting ability, Matcha has scored some really good goals from outside the box. But yeah, I think that could be an option. But I think it's more than just the options on its own. I think we have good options. I think we could have done better in the transfer market, but I think it's also more on the tactical patterns and what Kovac can do to try to switch things up a little bit, be a little bit more creative, and allow the guys to occupy different spaces and try to surprise the opponents because we are a little bit too predictable now.
Yeah, because Sabitzer in that deep role, Sabitzer even in an attacking role hasn't necessarily been the best passer historically, despite his reputation from that first season where he had 5 assists or whatever it was in the Champions League from 1.3 expected. I will repeat myself on that until I die. But Joe Bellingham in the championship last year did do a little bit of that from number 8, and I'm not sure we've seen a ton of that from Felix Mecha this season. He's rated about 0.06, which is half of an average chance per game. Sabitzer at 0.05. So combined out of our 2 starting midfielders, we're getting 0.11 or 1 average chance created per 90. So that is definitely an area in which we can improve. And again, when I asked that question about Chukwuemeka, and my God, I'm just thinking of the guy from Shrek he looks like. Lord Farquaad, aka Fabio Silva. Sorry, that's how I remember it. But anyway, with Fabio Silva, I'm a lot higher on Fabio Silva than I am on Carney Chukwuemeka. But that again, like these guys both can go on to have good careers at Borussia Dortmund. We just need to start seeing some development, especially out of Carney Chukwuemeka, because as a super sub, Fabio Silva has shown me in his 12, 14 minutes that he has some ability, but I need to see more. But I think like he does have some abilities there. But I just for me the attack, it's almost like maybe playing that double pivot with Job and Mecha gives you a bit more freedom to just have guys stay a little bit higher up the pitch, or it allows you to do a bit more effective counter pressing because you get a bit more legs in there, um, and you get those two true eights instead of um, Sabitzer, who sits very deep and he's very responsible, and that's what's led to his success. But if you have a guy who can still get back while also pressing a little bit higher up the pitch, that could just allow your defense to kind of fuel your attack. Very Kloppian, one might say. But I don't want to get too high on something we've never seen. So I'll just leave that illusion. Brian, do you have anything else to add on that?
No, I think you covered it all pretty well.
Okay, so I think we talked a little bit about the Bayern Munich game already, but let's just talk through some of the injuries and suspensions Dortmund faced because we haven't talked about that too much. Emre Can out indefinitely. Anselmino now has a recurring injury. Guirassy, he's come back early from the international duty. He was initially in France, according to some reports. Julian Duranville still not recovered from, I believe, a dislocated shoulder. Is there a player here you're most worried about?
I mean, I think the biggest worry would be Girassi, right? You want your top scorer to be available for a game like this, but at the end of the day, even if he isn't available, which knock on wood, he will be. I think that they were saying that at the end of the day, um, that he should be available, but I guess we'll see what happens with that. You still do have players like Ariemi, like Bayer, like Silva to fill that role. It would be interesting to see if Girassi can't play, who ends up being in the front two. Um, the tried and tested would be Maxi Bayer and Karim Adiemi, because I know they play well
And
together.
if you're gonna play that in a match, this is almost like the best one to do it in for me because you're probably gonna be the deepest, and those are your two running behind guys. But
Right, but I mean that would be your biggest worry, and as we're mentioning here, I think we do have players that like we have the depth to cover. So I mean, we'll see what happens with that, but that would be once again the biggest worry.
with Bayern Munich in recent years, we've had some of the defensive guys missing. So in this match, it'll be Stanisic and Alfonso Davies not available, as well as Hiroki Ito. Although I just feel bad for Hiroki Ito because since joining from Stuttgart, feel like he hasn't played. Musiala's still not back. Jonas Erbig, their backup goalie, again not fit. Anything to add there, Pedro?
No, I think I agree with Brian. I think the biggest piece though would I mean, ideally, not ideally, sorry. If we were to miss someone from this list that you just cited, I think it's going to be Girassi. I think for his ability to find center backs in Upamecano and whoever plays aside him. But from the Bayern players, I think I'm really glad not to see Musiala and also Davis like doubling down on the left flank. I think would be maybe too much for Yankoto, and in that sense, I would play Ryerson if all those guys would be fit. But yeah, I think even on the left side, I think Stanisic was covering as a left back, but right now since he's also injured, I think it was Leimer who was covering there, who has playing some decent minutes for them, but at the same time, I think the guys I'm fearing the most are the guys who are already playing regularly. Of course, Harry Kane, like he's playing really close to. I think they're playing with a front two with Harry Kane and Nicholas Jackson, but I think Kane being more the number 10 role, which we know it's a role that he can uh, play very well, and I think that's mostly why I think he's the best striker on the planet right now. But yeah, I think if we can manage that midfield and like be really discipline out of possession and find those spaces for Maxi Bayer to ADM to find those corridors to counter and transition with a lot of field to run, I think we could take advantage in those moments. But still a question if either we can be successful in the midfield. So yeah, I think we're just gonna have to wait to see about it.
Serhou Guirasssy's release clause lowers for certain clubs this coming summer. The reports are 50 to 60. I want to take this one first, to be honest, because with some interesting reports in the last couple weeks against Mainz, he has to drop out, and now in the international break, I know it's not that serious a match, but he has to drop out again. This is a guy with significant injury histories, and this was my worry when he started. Like, I'm not necessarily worried about the release clause, but I'm starting to see some recurring injuries. He had some muscle injuries at the start of last year, and then he came back. He played so many minutes, to the point where it was almost problematic in my opinion. And you've definitely seen the club is aware of that situation to some degree with the signing of Fabio Silva, like having that prioritized when you already had Maxi Bayer at the club. Like, we could have gone out and gotten a wide attacker, but we got another striker. And it's not even like we were so set on playing a front two. Like, Kovac dropped that after 2 match weeks. So to me, it's a bit concerning between the club leaking that the release clause has dropped, that you have these recurring injuries, and that you've signed a guy in his position who could potentially be the backup to a Maxi Bayer. Like, that there is some concern there. As much as I don't love the play style that Guirassy almost forces your side into, I still routinely admit on this show that he's a very effective player. He's definitely walking into your first 11. You can pencil him in there whenever he's fit. So I respect that, but I'm not necessarily worried about the leaving. I'm just worried about the injuries at this point, just because of that extensive injury history. This is a guy who's had some pretty major surgeries on his knees. What are your guys' thoughts on these stories coming out?
I think we kind of spoke about this somewhat recently on a somewhat recent episode. I think next year, if he was going to leave, I don't think it's the end of the world, simply because he's going on 30. The injuries that you mentioned, obviously, fantastic player. I love watching him play for Dortmund. He's a very exciting player. But at the end of the day, you also have to think about it from the player standpoint. It's clear that these clauses were put in place to make sure that we signed him, which meant that his long-term plan may or may not be to be here anyway. So it's like, if these were the clauses that were put in to ensure that we signed him, it's almost inevitable that this happens. At the end of the day, I think it's important that Dortmund do have a plan, that if he does end up leaving, that they know who to go for. Or, for example, a player like Fabio Silva, like you mentioned, steps up and can play that role to rotate in with Bayer and Adeyemi up front, depending on how we end up playing over the coming years. So, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think if he leaves, it'll suck at the end of the day, considering he's been such a good player for us. But it almost seems like with all these different pieces coming out now, it was almost predetermined, because these kind of feel like eject buttons, and now they're coming to light. So, I mean, I guess we'll see what happens. I do think Dortmund can survive. I think, it's not going to be the end of the world. I do think he carried us very much through a good part of the Şahin era, in particular. But I think the goal for this team isn't to rely so much on a singular player. And I think that's one piece of good that might come out of him leaving, because kind of like what you mentioned, Eli, you do cater to him when you play him up front. It's almost predictable that Dortmund, all the attacks are going to go through him. So maybe, moving forward, we see a bit more diversity in that sense. But yeah, his goal input will be missed. He's been a fantastic player if he does leave. I mean, it's, once again, we're not saying our goodbyes yet, but you never know with these sort of clauses.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think I agree with Brian and Eli. I think Girassi is very limited in terms of build-up play, but of course he's a deadly striker, and he showed why it was worth Dortmund to spend the release clause for on Stuttgart for him. I'm not that scared to lose him. That's like in just in terms of the release clause because I'm not sure how many clubs will be interested on paying that amount for a guy who is turning 30 years old next year. Um, from the top of my head, I remember only a few clubs were supposed to be uh, have the possibility to pay that clause. And from the options
Yep.
I'm just running through my head, I don't think there are many clubs there from that list that would be interested in signing a striker at this point in time. I would maybe sign, I'm not sure if that club was there, but Atletico Madrid, I think they could use a higher floor striker to partner up with Julian Alvarez. But at the same time, like I don't see many other clubs like really fighting for his signing, even with that clause as an option. But I think the future is not definitely with Sergio Girassi, but I think I'm glad to have him at the club at the moment. But yeah, I would not be desperate if we were to lose him for that clause. I think we signed Fabio Silva kind of just thinking of that on the back of our heads. And I think Dortmund will survive without him. I think we have good options as well with Maxi Bayer and Adeyemi who are younger. And I think our options, we should invest more playing time because they are the present and the future of this club. So yeah.
Yeah, like my fantasy world, and what I would just like from an aesthetic standpoint, might be to sell him and bring in some like two super press heavy, technical, dribbly little wingers. I'm not sure if they exist necessarily, or and let alone if they're on the market. But to me, that's something that would really excite me. To have that with Maxi Bayer as a press heavy striker and Kareem Adeyemi on the opposite wing. I don't know. Anyway, back into our next topic. Borussia Dortmund are interested in Chelsea defender Axel Disasi. Nico Kovac is familiar from him and at oh my god, I can't talk. Nico Kovac is familiar with him from his time at Monaco. Does this possibly relate to rumors of Nico Schlotterbeck to Bayern? In an interview during the international break, Schlotterbeck denied commenting on or he just declined, I believe that should say, Brian, commenting on the Bayern rumors. He did say he likes playing with Jonathan Tah and that they complement each other well. And then he proceeded to play next to him for the national team. So I'm going to say that's all this is. But what are your thoughts?
I don't want to read into it too much. I mean, I put it in the notes there because it is a talking point. I think people are jumping the gun a little bit. These rumors about Dortmund players, I mean, they come up every year when it comes to Bayern, or almost every year, especially around the time when we're about to play them. So it's not this is something we've seen before. I mean, if because I do know that Bayern, they do want to negotiate with Upamecano right now, and I mean, they may be in the market for a center back next season. With the Disasi rumors, we're going to be in the market for center backs anyway next year, depending on what happens with players like Emre Can and Nicolas Sula.
The difference with Emre Can and Nicolas Sula is they're both right-footed and Disasi is left-footed. You also have a bit of a concern for me with Disasi struggling to start regularly for Chelsea at the young age of 27, which is post-peak for a defender. So I again have a lot of concerns with Disasi, especially like if we're talking about a left-footed center back, you have the buy option for Tom Rother, who's played there this year. He can also cover you at fullback. So that's my 2 cents on it. I just wanted to point out the two defenders you mentioned were right-footed. Disasi's left-footed. I'm sorry I kept talking. You can continue.
Yeah, just to finish that point, the point I was just trying to make is that we're going to be in the market for center backs. I understand the difference there. I mean, even if, let's say, you don't, I mean, we have Ben Sebaini who can play in the center back role as well, and he has been playing in that role. Regardless, we're going to be looking for bodies in that position. You're still going to need a backup if Schlotterbeck stays. You're going to need someone to slot in there as well. So regardless, you're going to need left footers and right footers. But point being, we're just going to need those players anyway. So I don't want people necessarily to connect. We're linked with this player. He's definitely a Schlotterbeck replacement. I don't think that's a foregone conclusion at this point in time, and I think that time will tell. I do hope that Dortmund do better than what's been rumored in terms of their offer to him, because that was kind of laughable for probably your best player on the team. So hopefully that rumor is just complete BS in the first place. I'm sure they're having their discussions and all that, and I'm going to be ever the optimist and say, you know what, I hope he does sign. But I don't want people to panic because we're linked with another defender. Like, that's going to happen anyway. So.
On that point, yeah, I think I don't even know what to think. I think the first thing I thought when I saw the news, especially who asked that question, Florian Plettenberg. I'm sorry, excuse my language, but what a douche! Like, always trying to force like good players to Bayern Munich narrative. Like, it's just exhausting. Just tired of the guy. I was tired when he was forcing that narrative all the time from Harry Kane joining Bayern Munich, and eventually he got it. So in that sense, I think Nico was very polite and very respectful to the club, just not denying anything or just not to getting into the subject because he has a contract with Dortmund. And yeah, I think on what Brian said, I think Dortmund really need to step up their game if they want to keep Nico. And I think that's a guy you need to lock up as soon as possible. I mean, just give whatever the guy wants. Just give the oh, like all everything to Nico, like, because I think that's a guy who you should build your team around, like the likes of him and the Amy. I think that's the kind of player you want to lock into your club for the long term. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all I want to say on regards to DCC. For Christ's sake, no. Please just give me any other option rather than DCC. And yeah, just Eli, please continue.
So basically, for me, I just don't think that Bayern would ever stoop so low as to leak that they were signing a player from a team they're about to play in a well contested match. Like, I don't think that's ever happened before. And you can't sue me because I said it's never happened. Bayern, thank you very much. Anyway, yeah, I just want to close this topic out by asking you guys to give me the percentage of how confident you are that Borussia Dortmund can extend Nico Schlotterbeck's contract. I'm going to go out and start you off here. I'm going to say 90%. I'm 90% certain that Nico Schlotterbeck renews his contract with Borussia Dortmund, that they get a deal done. I think it'll be over 10 million euros per year. But what do you think, Brian?
I'm at a 75%. I think it's really, I mean, at the end of the day, the financials are important here as well. I think that they definitely need to up their offer. If, once again, the rumored offer of what they've already, or what's already come out is accurate, it definitely needs to be upped. I do think they can obviously find a deal. Schlotterbeck has said on numerous occasions that he identifies with the club. He's happy playing here. It would be a royal mess up if they did. So I'm going to say 75.
Yeah, no, I think I'm gonna go on the same line as Brian. Like, it's still Borussia Dortmund, and yeah, we haven't been known for being like consistently like title contending for the past few years. So, and think of a guy of the caliber of Nico Schlotterbeck that he wants to compete at a high level and always fight for trophies every season. So, I have that doubt in my mind, but I think I will agree with Brian with 75 or 70%. I think not close to 90% sure as Eli is, but yeah, I still think we're gonna make that deal happen. But please, we need to make it fast because we can keep dragging that thing as long as we are dragging as it currently stands.
Well, I'm clearly back to my optimistic stuff because I'm way up there. Borussia Dortmund are also interested in Hertha Berlin talent Kenneth Eichhorn. He's a 16-year-old currently playing center defensive mid, I believe, for their U19s. I have nothing to add here. The source is Sport Build. If you guys know anything, please chime in. Otherwise, we can close out the show by shouting out some of our fans.
Please do that. I don't know the guy.
Yeah,
I don't trust
shout him
you.
out.
Yeah.
Well, last week Ollie said he'd be kicking it to me to give the shout-outs to our top 5 Bundesliga fantasy players. I'm going to count you up from 5. In 5th, we have Junior Inteligente. It's probably Junior because Inteligente is written in Spanish. I'm very smart. In 4th, we have Pines of Bayer. And in 3rd, we have Christfeem. And then we have in 2nd a great name in Bissek and Bauer. Bissek actually linked with a move to the Bundesliga. For those who don't know, it's Jan Orel. Bissek, who's currently at Inter Milan. And then in the top spot, the name is cut off. I clicked on it to try and expand it. It still won't show me the full name, but it's supercalifragilistic. And then there's something else. It could be expialidocious, or it could be a Bundesliga pun, but I have no idea. So that's it for us. You can find our socials everywhere you listen to podcasts, including whatever device and app you are currently listening to this on. But if you're on a different one, please let us know and we can try and be on that app as well. You can follow us on Blue Sky, Instagram, looking to get a lot more content on the Instagram, as well as our YouTube channel where we are at Dortmund Dispatch. Please give us a subscription because yours truly has a personal YouTube account. And we are in a battle with my personal YouTube account in a race to 100 subscribers. And Dortmund Dispatch had a 68 subscriber lead, and it is down to just 5. So you can subscribe to Dortmund Dispatch on YouTube as we are in a race to 100 subscribers with my personal YouTube account, which you can find at Eli. If you look up Eli Brand Thrifts, you'll see a bunch of shorts. That's me. If you're into clothing, watch it. If not, you're much more likely to be into Borussia Dortmund. And so you want this podcast to beat me in my race to 100 subscribers with essentially myself, but we don't need to think about it like that. Is there anything you guys want to plug today?
No, I'll leave the plug-in to you today.
Okay, well, that'll do it for us, and have a good one.
Jadon Sancho to score. No mistakes this time.
That is a rocket.
Royce out. Another fantastic goal by Marco Royce. Haaland's volley is beautiful beyond
Jetzt
compare.
kommt das Wunder von Dortmund. Foulspiel von Nico an Götze.
Needs to lay it off. We're going to shot away. Oh, what a goal!